What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Charter Podcast brought to you by St. Xavier University. The gang is back together. 𝗪𝗓 𝗵𝗶𝗹, 𝗂𝗏 𝗏𝗏, Ruthie 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀 here with you. And we woke up this morning. Actually, I don't know if the two of you did, but I think I can speak for all of us when I say we woke up this morning being like, there's football this week. Like, this is Christmas week. You know, it's like not Christmas Day, but you're like, okay, like Christmas is coming. Okay. And I don't even celebrate Christmas, but I love Christmas. So I think like there's this energy, there's an aura that is, I think we're all sort of feeling, not just on this podcast, but probably if you're listening to this episode or watching us on Chicago Sports Network, because tomorrow we get to hear from Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles. And the next day there's going to be practice, and it's not off season. It's not mini camp. This is training camp, the real deal, where every rep counts. Clay, I know you know what that's all about. We're going to get into it all. There's a lot to catch up on football wise. A lot of things happened the last week when a couple of us had more time off, and we just kind of took a little hiatus, slow news week, but then sort of felt like everything, a lot happened over the last 5-ish days or so. So before we get into football, guys, want to hear how you're doing, what's going on. Alex, you were with bears and fish and salmon and doing things.
Yeah, I was deep in Saskatchewan, practically at the Northwest Territories. It was nice to get away. My uncles, cousins, brother-in-law caught a lot of big fish. My father and my brother-in-law each caught trophy pike. I caught a trophy pike last year, not this year. I topped out at 39. But yeah, you mentioned the bears. That was the craziest part. There was one shore lunch where we're, frying up some pike, and who decides to crash the party but two black bears who just like kind of hung out right outside our lunch camp for an hour and a half. And one guy thought he was tough and was doing all these bluff charges. One of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life. A black bear pretending he's going to run at you. That was quite an experience. So it's good to be back in Chicago, big city. There are no bears here. I'm not going to get eaten here. But it was really fun to get off the grid for a little bit.
So what does one do when a bear bluff charges you? I'm sorry. I'm out of there.
Yeah, right? So I actually got reprimanded by the guide because I took a couple steps back, and the guide was like, don't do that. Stand your ground. So apparently what I have learned since then, and I wish somebody had told me this beforehand, knowing that there's bears in the area. It's apparently black bear, fight back, black fight back, brown lay down, like you're supposed to cover your neck, play dead, and white say goodnight. Because if you run into a polar bear, he's going to eat you. Polar bear's going to eat you.
Yeah, polar bears are the violent one.
So yeah, it was funny. The guides just truly did not care about these bears at all. They're like, they think they're tough, but there's no way they're going to attack us. They're just sizing us up. So they're like, stand your ground. Don't show fear in the eyes of these black bears.
More scared of you than you are of them, probably.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Well, there are some bears up in Lake Forest. So
yeah, I couldn't get away from them.
See what I did there? Clay, you were all over Europe. Tell us what your vacation entailed.
It was good. I was going to say something funny, but I'm not going to anymore. Anyways, I went to Sweden, and you guys know I'm a big history nerd, and I absolutely loved it. We went to a bunch of museums by day, did a lot of traveling to some amazing scenic places, and then ate our faces off of meatballs and a bunch of Swedish dinners, and it was just an amazing time. Was there with 3 friends, my best friend since 4th grade. And then from Sweden, we did a quick stop in Albania, went to the coast. It was beautiful. And then went to Mykonos, Greece, which is great. But I didn't realize it is strictly like a big party there. So we only stayed 3 days in Mykonos and then flew back to New York, hung out with some more friends in New York City. I used to live there for a little bit once upon a time. And now we're back in Chicago. I was woke up a little, man, vacation's over. But then I remembered, Ruthie, football's back.
Yeah, baby. Hell yeah, it is. Clay, what was the best thing you ate?
That is a tough question.
Okay.
But in Mykonos, actually, there was some really good restaurants that we went to, and the food was just top of the line. So I mean, every meal I had, I don't think I was disappointed once.
Love it. Okay, so cool. I went on my vacation prior to, I had a great time. We've talked about it already on this podcast, and it's not a vacation podcast. I did end up going to St. Louis this past weekend, visited my family, saw my sisters, and we had a lovely little weekend in St. Louis, sort of some wholesome family time before. It's also really fun. Like, my sister has a boyfriend. I'm married. There were no boys. It was just the three sisters, our parents. We just like had a little �ฬ𝗪𝗏 weekend, which was so fun.
All right, question for you, Ruthie. When you go to St. Louis, outside of the touristy St. Louis spots, what's the one place you got to visit when you were back home? That's like, home visit, I got to do this.
Okay, that's a good question. Usually I would say it would be 𝗪𝗓, which is a famous frozen custard place. We didn't go this weekend because we were just like trying to squeeze in so much family time and like extended family, my grandma, all the things. But that would be like my advice to anyone. Like, I had 𝗪𝗓 at my wedding. Like, that was we had little 𝗪𝗓 cups at my wedding. I think, honestly, my favorite, Forest Park. Like, I always walk through Forest Park with my mom. We did a long Forest Park walk, and it's actually really sad. The tornado that ripped through St. Louis a couple months ago took out like a huge chunk of trees and homes that made like sort of right on the cusp of like my neighborhood in Forest Park, like right where I grew up. Like, it is, trees are like, there are no more trees. It's like very eerie. It was a little sad to see over the weekend when we did the walk. It's just like, it blows your mind to see. It's a street I grew up on. I've seen it all the time. It's this like especially in the summer, it's just like gorgeous and green. And it was just like open, like some monster had come through, and like all the sidewalks are ripped up. They're like all blocked off. It's like actually really, really, really sad. But Forest Park is so beautiful. The basin, the art museum, the golf courses, like all through Forest Park. It's just such an underrated, like no one really knows that we have that gem right in the smack dab middle of the country in St. Louis. It's bigger than Central Park, Forest Park.
I did not know that.
So it's a really cool place to go. And it was so humid, classic St. Louis hot weather this past weekend. But it was fun to like kind of go through some of the old stomping grounds. One of my best friends from high school just moved back to St. Louis, which is like so cool to like kind of be there as an adult. And like, she's married with a dog, and like now she's experiencing it in like a very different phase of her life. So that's fun. But it was, that was really it. Drove back this morning actually.
Whoa.
And saw my grandma, and now I'm home and feeling ready, trying to get the house situated. It feels like, Clay, we're going to have some long days ahead of us, early practices, and then we come do the big pro football show. We'll have podcasts smacked in somewhere. We got to talk about how we're going to squeeze that all in, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. And it all starts tomorrow. So it's going to be a blast. So let's get into it, guys. I think I'm going to go chronologically here as some of the news that we've missed and haven't really discussed yet on this podcast. And I don't want to rehash a ton because I think our listeners have gotten that conversation elsewhere, right, over the last couple of weeks. But I also think it's important for us to kind of just recap, like, okay, let's set the stage for tomorrow's press conference where we get to hear from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson. How soon do we think Ryan Poles will be asked about his contract extension when that press conference starts tomorrow?
I mean, like first or second? It's going to be early. Clay's holding up one finger. First question. Yeah, he's going to be asked about it early. Just, I guess, to give our kind of reaction to the news. It'll be interesting to see if he acknowledges it because, many NFL teams, the Bears are not alone in this, have a history of not really talking about contracts for the front office guys. But I wonder if they'll talk about, and I think this is the key, him being aligned with Ben Johnson. And according to the reports, it seems like these guys are going to be under contract for 5 years together. So I think, one, that's key, that Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson are now connected at the hip. You're not going to have a situation where Ben Johnson in the middle of his tenure or towards the beginning of his tenure is dealing with a lame duck GM, and the team has to sort that out. You got the quarterback 1 year off a little bit for Ben Johnson, but we'll just say for all intents and purposes, the quarterback, the GM, and the head coach all aligned. And that rarely happens and has not happened much in the Bears' tenure, getting all three of those guys aligned together. So I think that's really huge. So, I have more thoughts. We could talk about the pros and cons, whether Ryan Poles is deserving or not. There are reasons you can point at that I'm sure we're going to get into that say, yeah, this is a great move. And there are some reasons to say, you know what? The win-loss record isn't all it's cracked up to be. But before we get into that, I'll just kick it over to Clay. Clay, your initial reactions as well on the Ryan Poles stuff.
Definitely mixed feelings, because you bring up some good points there, Alex. You want that alignment for an organization. You don't have to worry about bringing in a new GM. You're like you said, lame duck general manager, quarterback 4 more years. Now you got GM, head coach 5 years. That's great. That's something that the Bears have rarely done. But then, as you said, now let's look at what Ryan Poles has done to deserve an extension. And for me, there's not a lot of examples of something that he really did. Obviously, the trade. I mean, that kind of fell into your lap with the first pick. Okay, we can still give him credit for that, but there's been a lot of mismanagement, missed moves, 15 and 36. And the big thing for me is what's been the buzzword this entire offseason, coaches, players. There's been one
accountability.
Buzzword. Accountability, right? Where does accountability start? The very top. It starts at the top. The Ryan Poles, the guy that set this whole thing up, the guy that maybe he shouldn't have brought back Matt Eberflus. Maybe he should have. The guy that signed off on that. Guy that signed off on Shane Waldron as your offensive coordinator. The guy that traded for a 33rd overall pick. That's basically first round pick for Chase Claypool. Guy that's 𝗟 Jones, 𝗵𝗄. We don't know what Kieran's going to be. 𝗵𝗀, excuse me. Thank you, Alex, for correcting me whenever I do say that. And I always think of you.
You got it.
Just looking at you reminded me. But accountability, if I'm a player on that team and these guys are preaching to me accountability. So this guy went 15 and 36, has made a bunch of bad moves, haven't won, kept Eberflus, brought in Shane Waldron, had to fire a head coach, brought in a new head coach. That's not accountability. That's not being accountable for what you have done. For me, it's, okay, show me that you've got better. We still have some time. You start winning. You start showing improvement. Okay, that's accountability. Okay, now you've earned it. We're earning things here. We're not giving something to you because the head coach wanted to be with the Bears and you got the number one guy and he likes working with you. You guys have a good, obviously, working relationship, but I don't think you had to do it right now. But it's one of those things where we'll wait and see. This could end up being a really good move with alignment. But for me, when you're talking all this accountability with a guy at 15 and 36, it just doesn't make that much sense.
It's a good point, Clay. I think the best move Ryan Poles has done, and it's also one of the most recent moves he's made, is get Ben Johnson here, right? And we don't even know if that's going to work out yet. So I think there's an element of, okay, perhaps there has been some accountability behind the scenes. Ryan got, with the help of Kevin Warren and obviously George McCaskey being on board, he said, I'm going to get Ben Johnson here because we got to do that because I messed up the last time. Like I haven't done so hot. Give me another shot to get the right guy in here. Let me develop the quarterback that I drafted and give me this, a few more years of opportunity to prove myself. And I think we've all heard about the relationship between Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles. And I think that can't really be understated. I would like to believe that Ben Johnson has really liked the time he spent alongside Ryan Poles, watching him evaluate, watching his staff evaluate talent. Maybe he's on board with this. You'd like to believe that there was a conversation with Ben Johnson, like, hey, how's it going? Do you want Ryan here for the long haul? Because Ben Johnson ain't going anywhere. So I think I think what this is telling us, I hope, is that there's a lot of not just alignment when it comes to time, but alignment in your belief system. And, they agree on the type of players they want to have in the building and the style of football that they want to play with that talent that they're acquiring. And I think the biggest decision that Ryan Poles made was drafting Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall pick. And we will find a lot out about that draft pick, I think, this year, because as we've talked about a ton on this podcast and on other channels, if Ben Johnson can't get the most out of Caleb Williams, I don't know who can.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to learn a lot about not just Caleb Williams this year, but we're going to learn a lot about Ryan Poles as a general manager and if he made the right decision with drafting Caleb Williams, right? Like, I think that's going to be a big part of the story. So listen, I'm happy for Ryan. I think Ryan's great. I enjoy talking to him. I enjoy being around him. I think he is a very relatable sort of person. Like, you'd want to go have a beer with him. I think he's just kind of one of those guys that is easy to talk to and approachable. And clearly it feels like there's this sort of young, right? Like Ryan and Ben are around the same age. And I think there's something that's clicking maybe behind the scenes that we don't see that I think is a good sign for the Bears moving forward, or at least we hope.
Before we move on, Clay, you mentioned some of the detractors of like, hey, why would you do this now? And all of that is valid, right? When you look at the win-loss record, when you look at some of the misses, it's absolutely valid criticism. But I think there are some things we could also point to as pros, as reasons why this was a good time for this to happen now. And especially when it relates to this free agency period. I think Ryan Poles, we talked about it so much previously, his first few seasons, he was so disciplined in free agency, and he did a really good job of keeping the Bears' balance sheet in order, right? He signed a bunch of free agent contracts. A lot of them did not work out. We don't have to belabor all of those points, right? But he signed deals that didn't hinder the Bears moving forward, right? Where they could identify their TJ Edwards, give TJ Edwards an extension. They could identify their Andrew Billings, give Andrew Billings an extension, and keep powder dry. So this year, when it was clear the Bears needed to get the offensive line right, the Nate Davis stuff didn't work out. Cody Whitehair was getting older. Lucas Patrick didn't work out, right? Ryan Bates, all of these various moves that didn't work out, the Bears weren't hamstrung because he was so disciplined in free agency, so disciplined with the salary cap that they could go out and get Drew Dahlman, the gem of that center class, right? I mean, we talk so much about Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson is by far and away the most important thing of this offseason, but Drew Dahlman is also huge. That you could trade for a Joe Thuney and then extend Joe Thuney. So, Ryan Poles tore this thing down to the studs, and that first 10-game losing streak and that terrible, terrible season under Matt Eberflus, I said it was unfair to kind of hold that record against Matt Eberflus because Ryan Poles had torn that thing to the studs. You could say the same thing. Like a lot of those losses, especially early on when you're trading away Khalil Mack, when you're trading away Roquan Smith, when you're trading away Robert Quinn, tearing it down to rebuild it. Like, obviously, there are going to be losses there. Now, last year's 10-game losing streak, different story. That's a different story. And what I think, and this, Ruthie, just to underline what you were saying, for all intents and purposes, it's going to come down to, does Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams work? Does that pairing work together? If they do, Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson, and Caleb Williams are going to be here a long time. If it doesn't, you can say goodbye to all three, honestly. So that's where the alignment, I think, comes into play. It's like, okay, now you're going to give these three guys the best crack they can by getting them all together. If it works out, phenomenal. If it doesn't, that's the biz, right? I'm not trying to be crass. I'm not trying to be rude. That's just the nature of the biz. So yeah, you could argue pros, you could argue cons. I think it's all super reasonable, as you mentioned, Clay. Like that stuff is real. But now these three guys are going to get a real shot, real runway to do something with their time together.
Did you have anything to add, Clay?
No, I mean, valid points. Moving forward, it's done. You can't cry over spilled milk. If you have an opportunity now with the way you've constructed this roster, where on paper it looks pretty solid. It looks like this roster should be a winning roster. And you look at a team though, like the Vikings, right? They have 34 wins with a new GM and coach when they hired their new GM and coach back when the Bears hired 𝗰𝗶𝘀𝗀. The Bears have 15. It's different rosters. Yeah, the Bears had to tear down, but you saw what the Vikings were able to do with a Sam Darnold, with bringing in some of these bridge type guys. So I don't think that that's the end of the race. The race is still ongoing, and the Bears could really pass the Vikings and really take this thing to the next level. And I like the moves they've done this year. Like you said, Alex, you put yourself in a situation to go out and get those players. Okay, now you got to show us that you can do it.
Right. And I think it's also worth noting, David Haas said this on the radio, I think, and it stuck with me because this is the NFL. You can get extended and get fired. They just have to pay you. Or David Haas said, I think he said, the only thing that extensions tell me is how much money you owe someone when they get fired or something like along those. I'm paraphrasing. But I think there's an element of I don't think that Ryan Poles is going to be sitting in his chair oh, I'm good. I'm safe. I think he still knows this is the NFL. You got to win. Your job's on the line. It's a results driven business. And you've given this sort of runway of more opportunity, but this might kind of be your last straw too. At the same time, everyone's watching you, so I think he embraces that. I think that's someone that will not ever be complacent in what he's doing, but I think he did the best thing this offseason, which was convince Ben Johnson that this was the place to be and got him here and paid him to be here, convinced Kevin Warren and George McCaskey to dish it out like they've never dished out before. That's a win. So now you got to just get that record going the other way when it comes to actual wins and losses on the field. Speaking of Ryan Poles, guys, the other big news of the weekend is history was made in the NFL this weekend as the second round draft pick contract situation is seemingly resolved, at least for the Bears in this moment. Historically, second round draft picks do not have fully guaranteed contracts. Luther Burden III will have a fully guaranteed fourth season. I have that correct, right?
Yeah, fully guaranteed.
So Luther Burden III, who we have not gotten to see much of so far because of some injuries, and we'll see if we get to see him on the field this week. But that was an interesting move because of the way that the contracts were getting done with the players that were drafted ahead of him in the second round. What was your guys' reaction? I hope I did an okay job of sort of painting that picture. I'll let you guys sort of dive deeper into the details and give your reactions as well.
Clay, you want to kick us off this time?
Yeah, so I think it's good. And obviously I'm speaking from a player perspective here. Most sports do get guaranteed contracts. I think this was something that's a good step for the players. And in the long run, does it really mean that much? Like a second round draft pick fully guaranteed. What this is doing is basically saying if the second round draft pick isn't very good in his last year and he gets cut or he gets traded, he gets signed by another team, now he's guaranteed his money. But in my opinion, it's a victory for the players, but it's a small one. If you're drafted in the second round, statistically speaking, you're going to make it through your first contract. And then that's not going to mean that much. But I think it's good because, you never know. A big injury, player couldn't be the same, could end up, being released and not get paid some of what he's due. So I think it's good. I think it's something that's good for team morale, player morale, and the players do respect that. It's something that players want, security. Now you don't have to worry about, what happens if I go out there and I suffer a big injury. And if you're injured, yes, you are still going to get paid because you got injured on the football field. But if you're injured, you come back, you're not the same. Now you do have that in writing that you will be paid the contract that you signed.
Right. And I am fully aligned with Clay here. Like, I am all for players getting paid. These are guys who are putting their bodies on the line, quite simply for our entertainment, right? So go get your money. Happy for you, Luther Burden. You know, now you get to play, as Clay was kind of alluding to, like, you still got to earn that second contract. You still got to go out and earn that second contract if you want the generational crazy wealth. But now you have a little bit of security in case something, disastrous happens. If there's a big injury, if there's something unexpected, that security I think is really important. So I am all for players getting played.
I think it's inevitable, with the direction, like Clay was saying, the TV contract money, the money that's going into the NFL, there's just so much more. The owners are making more. Like, there's just so much more money to go around that it just sort of makes sense. Like, we're just slowly but surely going to get these contracts guaranteed for all these guys. And like you said, I mean, sacrificing your bodies, your lives in a lot of cases, for this game and for a fan's entertainment is can't be overstated. So I think it's interesting when you look at Luther Burden in particular. And here's why, guys. There was a level of entitlement that came with Luther Burden III when he was drafted. He felt he deserved to be a first-round pick, which we all said, great, go out and prove it. Like, we were all excited about that sort of mentality, chip on your shoulder, have this sort of like, I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I do sort of look at this from a very, non-player perspective, from maybe a general manager or a coach's perspective for a moment, and say, okay, well, now we're treating him like a first round pick because his contract's fully guaranteed. Obviously, you don't have that 5th-year option, and there are other things that come with it. It's not as much money, all those things. But, you do sort of think of like, this is someone that I think wants to go prove everyone wrong. And now you're sort of handing him something that he didn't earn necessarily because of his play on the field. It's just sort of the nature of the business. Listen, this is me kind of just like really playing a stretch devil's advocate here. I'm not sure I even necessarily believe this. I'm just saying, I'm wondering what the conversation maybe was like for Ryan Poles or for Ben Johnson as they're, looking at this. Are we really going to fully guarantee, this player's contract, who I think is someone that Ben Johnson's very excited about to have in his offense. I think it's someone Ryan Poles is very excited that fell to him. But it's just from kind of that other perspective, I'm curious. The Luther Burden story is really a curious one to me, and I'm just because we haven't seen much of him, at this level yet. So that's why that was just a little nugget I wanted to throw in there. That was the big storyline. Obviously, those guys. Another big thing, obviously, about all this getting wrapped up. I'm really happy that they are going to be able to participate. There are going to be no holdouts. Like, there's no issues. They're going to be on the field. 𝗦𝗦cie 𝗰𝗶𝗹, day one, competing at left tackle. Like, that is huge, right? That he's going to be out there on the field. He can't afford to miss a single snap if he's going to compete. And that sort of brings me into one other thing I wanted to just touch on. I'm just really glad we're also not covering like the Cincinnati Bengals situation, like the Shamar Stewart situation that's just gotten so out of hand. I'm just so glad that we're not like, I'm just glad this is over with. Like, they got signed, it's done, we can move forward.
We got to deal with our Roquan Smith sending a really nasty notes message on Family Fest Day or whenever that was. So it's like, we've paid our dues. It's now time for some other team. It's time for the Browns to deal with whatever the Browns are dealing with. Time for the Bengals. We had our Roquan Smith story a few years ago. We paid our dues.
100%. So to sort of continue the conversation about 𝗦𝗦cie 𝗰𝗶𝗹, which is going to be one that I think we may talk about every single day of camp. But I think what's really going to be interesting is who's going to be out there on day one and of practice. And what we do know is that one player will not be out there as of this moment when we are recording this on Monday, July 21st at 1:48 p.m. I think everyone has heard by now that Jaylon Johnson has started camp on the NFI, which is the non-football injury list, which means he did not get hurt at the facility or in a game with the Chicago Bears. He could have gotten hurt working out on his own. He could have gotten hurt picking up his kid. He could have gotten hurt doing something completely unrelated to football, lifting weights. We don't know yet. Hopefully we'll have some answers tomorrow when we talk to Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson. This was disappointing news to me, guys, because Jaylon Johnson was another person that we did not see much of during the offseason program. with a brand new coaching staff, brand new defense coordinator, and also someone that just got paid very recently a lot of money, who also just made a very in jest comment to Rich Eisen. I didn't read too much into it at the time, but kind of was joking about maybe I should start having, conversations about my next deal. Now he's not going to be out there when there won't be pads on Wednesday, but when they get out there on the field on Wednesday, he won't be out there as of this moment. Your reaction, Clay, when you saw this?
I thought it was interesting. PUP, I've been on PUP before after I got injured with the Patriots during OTAs. Had to get bilateral surgery of my adductor, ended up missing most of training camp, came back for the last few preseason games. First game back was actually against the Bears. And in the preseason in 2016, that's neither here nor there. But with Jaylon, I don't think it's something serious. We all saw he was out at his camp. He's on the Rich Eisen show. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal because I just don't think it's a big injury. And Jaylon Johnson is a guy, when you're a veteran of his caliber, you know what you need to do to play the game of football. You're not a rookie that's really needs those reps to build confidence, to say that I can play in this league, to know how to play in a scheme. He's learned a number of NFL schemes before. So I don't think it's a huge deal. And I heard people, maybe he's holding out because of his contract. We've heard that that's not what's going on here. That was kind of him just talking about the cornerback market on the Rich Eisen show. And obviously he just got paid, I think, like last year. Was it before last season?
Before last season.
Yeah, before last season. So I don't think that it's anything to do with his contract. I think this guy's ready to go. The way he sounds, even talking on the Rich Eisen show, hearing some of the clips from his camp, like this guy's ready to go. He's excited about this new defense, playing in Dennis Allen's scheme. He wants to shadow the number one receiver on each team. And I don't think that it'll be a big deal because, as a player, that veterans do not need as many reps as rookies when it comes to getting ready to play in the NFL.
Yeah, I also have no sense that it would be any kind of holdout situation. I mean, he was in a scenario where he could have held out previously when he was like actually in a contract year and didn't, is very dedicated to becoming the best cornerback in the league, is very dedicated to winning football games. Winning means so much to him. Being the best cornerback possible means so much to him. He does not strike me as a guy who would hold out. It will be interesting. It'll be really interesting to get any kind of update if we're given an update about Jaylon Johnson, because obviously Case Keenum was on the NFI list for like less than 24 hours. Yeah, exactly. They put out the announcement that, all these guys were going on the NFI list at like 3:30. By 3 p.m. the next day, it was like, Case Keenum's back. So we'll see if Jaylon Johnson is able to come back sooner rather than later. He is obviously a man who is incredibly important to the Bears franchise. If you are having conversations about who the best football player is on the Chicago Bears, Jaylon Johnson is 1,000% a part of that conversation. He is that good. He is that important, especially in a division where you're going to be facing Justin Jefferson twice, where you're going to be facing, Amon-Ra St. Brown plays in the slot, I guess, but, Jameson Williams and Christian Watson, there are some big time receivers now, Matthew Golden. So he's an important dude. For his sake, I hope he's healthy, and it'll be really interesting to hear what updates or what non-updates we get tomorrow.
I, too, am not reading too much into the NFI designation. I will say this did sort of light a light bulb in my head, thinking about, oh, wow, if Jaylon Johnson's not out there, they're a little thin in the secondary. And obviously you have Terrell Smith, you have Tyreek Stevenson. But that drop-off from Jaylon to whoever's next, what are your thoughts on the depth at the cornerback position when we look at it from that perspective?
I think no matter who they have at depth, the drop off from their CB1 to their CB3 when your CB1 is Jaylon Johnson is going to be,
of course,
extremely noticeable. I mean, this guy's really good. Terrell Smith is really interesting, right? Because he's a guy who's pretty solid in man coverage, which we expect the Bears to play more of. But he's also been a guy who's been banged up throughout his career, missed a lot of time with illness, injury, and once again was not out there for the majority of the offseason program. Zay Frazier is a super toolsy rookie. If we're looking at guys, going through that depth, that at least Al Harris was really excited about. But this is a guy who's coming from a smaller school, and yes, he is toolsy, but is he ready to start week one, after a full training camp? I don't know. That's probably putting a lot on that guy's plate. And then, Nahshon Wright, we're talking about Nahshon Wright. Was he a guy who we liked at training camp? Yeah. Or during the offseason program? He made some plays that look good, but the difference between Nahshon Wright and Jaylon Johnson is obviously vast. Enormous. So I don't think it really matters who the Bears had as their CB3. Jaylon Johnson is so good. That's a big hole if he does miss a significant amount of time.
Clay, what are your thoughts on the depth at corner?
I think you're right, Ruthie. If Jaylon Johnson goes down, this corner group definitely takes a hit, but that's any team when your best player, best defensive player at least, goes down, you're going to be in a world of hurt. I believe in Terrell Smith and Tyreek Stevenson enough to where I think that you can get by with those guys. I don't think, obviously, you're going to lock down a half of the field. It will change the way that you call a game. If you're Dennis Allen, you're not going to be able to call a lot of the same things that you would call when you got Jaylon Johnson on a number one receiver. Now you might have to stick more to zone coverage, and we know that Dennis Allen likes being aggressive. Maybe you have to blitz more, things like that. It would change the scheme a lot, but I think that these guys got a little bit of experience now, Terrell Smith and Tyreek Stevenson, and I think they're going to play better and they're going to continue to improve. But missing Jaylon Johnson, a guy that could lock down half the field, that can stick on a number one receiver, will hurt any way you look at it.
Yeah, agreed. I want to know what questions you want answered other than injury related, which I think is going to be a big storyline tomorrow when we hear from Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles. Other than injuries, are there questions that you have for Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles before we hear from some of the players tomorrow and before they get on the field on Wednesday?
I want to know how building the offense went, right? The last time we left these guys, he said, okay, we put everything on tape. We've tried a lot of different stuff. We've put a lot of people in a bunch of different areas. And now it is time for myself and the coaches to get together and build the Chicago Bears offense. Can you give us any hints as to what that looked like? Can you give us a preview of what we might see out there? How was that process for you building this offense around Caleb Williams? Just everything tangentially related to Ben Johnson's first crack at building this thing, and then maybe his reflection on the offseason program. And as you self-scout yourself as head coach of the Chicago Bears, are there things that you really liked that you did during the offseason training camp that you're going to pull forward into training camp? Are there things you're going to change? How do you self-scout yourself now that you've gone through your first offseason program? So those are a few things I'm interested in.
And so the questions that I would say I would like answered would be, how close is this to a finished roster for Ryan Poles? And the roster is never finished. You're always looking out there for a guy who gets released, guy on the practice squad, maybe who can eventually in the end of the season come into some special teams. It's never finished. And that's something that these guys preach to the team. You've never made it. It's one-day contracts, never finished. But are you looking to bring in a backup safety? Are you very confident that Jaquan Brisker will be there for the entire season? Are you looking to maybe bring in an edge rusher, or are you certain that Dayo Dengbo, a guy you paid like a top 20 edge rusher, will be a guy that can be a difference maker? So how finished is this roster as it comes to opening day against the Vikings? Obviously, I think it's going to matter what you see in training camp and how these guys play and how they fit into this new system, both offensively and defensively, because that's going to change how players' values. Obviously, the system that you're in really shifts and changes a player's value, because some players can be a Pro Bowler in one system. They go to the next system, not good. I remember when I was playing with Philly, we got 𝗦𝗶𝗶 right? This guy was just an unbelievable player with the Raiders, I think it was. And we get 𝗦𝗶, and everybody's like, oh man, this is going to be huge for our defense. And 𝗦𝗶 in our system was not good. I hope 𝗦𝗶's not listening to this, but he just didn't have a good time in Philadelphia. He wasn't a player. So how do these guys fit into the system? The guys, the Matt Eberflus guys, what positions are going to be weak once you start putting the pads on? You start hitting. Okay, who's like we already talked about? Who's going to be getting the reps at the tackle position? How much is Karan going to be doing there? How much is 𝗁cie getting? How much is Braxton? If Braxton's back at full go, there is running back a position that you think you might still have your eye on, or are you happy with Roschon and DeAndre Swift? So that's probably my first question. And then on Ben, I think Alex hit the nail on the head here. Did you see some things in OTAs that helped you to build this offense? You talked about ripping it down to the studs. Or are you now still in this position where you want to see it with the pads on, the pass rush, with the running game, instead of just tagging a guy off, who's breaking tackles? Do you still have to wait and now build it that way because you haven't seen real football? So those are probably some of the top questions that I would want to know and I would want to ask.
Yeah, I think those are all really interesting, Clay. I think it's all kind of related to here is like, we know the non-football injury list. We don't know the football injury list, right? Like we don't know who's going to start on PUP or isn't going to be out there. So what's the status of Braxton Jones? What's the status of Colston Loveland, guys? Your first round pick. Like we saw him do some things this offseason. He said he feels great. He looks bigger, like much bigger than when he did his introductory press conference. He's obviously started lifting and doing more things with his upper body. So I'm so curious to see if he's out there on Wednesday, because that was the goal, right? To have him out there by the start of training camp. That was the goal that he set for himself and that the team had set and said that was the plan. So those are some of the guys I'm really intrigued by. Remember, TJ Edwards wasn't out there during the offseason program towards the end. There were just some other sort of little injuries where we're keeping our eye on. Kyler Gordon, how healthy can Jaquan Brisker stay? Is he going to be full go in training camp? Like, are they tackling to the ground? Like, what's this going to look like? I think that's what's all to be determined and very exciting. And we get back into the swing of things starting tomorrow, which is going to be such a blast. Any final words here, guys, before we wrap this thing up?
Just one more thing, if we're talking about like the very beginnings of training camp and some questions we have, not necessarily at the podium, but what we can see with our eyes. Ben Johnson made it pretty clear that this is not going to be a get in shape training camp. It's show up in shape so we can get to work. Who took that seriously? Who's out there? No problem. And who's hand on the knees, knee on the ground, helmet by your side. So who are those guys that took that seriously? And then what does that mean for those guys? Are we going to see, right? We talk so much about accountability. If there's a guy who is noticeably gassed, noticeably fatigued, not keeping up, are there any consequences? Is that guy doing extra reps? Is that guy losing snaps? Will we get any kind of insights from any of those things? And then who knows? Maybe nobody will be gassed. Maybe everybody will have taken that super seriously. They're all going to be full stamina, in which case it's like, hey, Ben Johnson's message is reaching these guys. Great news.
Clay, was this a get in shape summer for you or a show up in shape summer for you?
It was just a stay in shape summer, especially after the long vacation I took. But
you and me both, baby. We got to get back on the grind.
I hit some good workouts the last few days and, sweat out a lot of those meatballs. But for me, I think the last thing that I would say is I want to know the physicality of this training camp. How much hitting, tackling are we going to do? This is a cool, interesting time for the players. You're always a little bit anxious coming into a training camp, especially when you had a new coach. You're going to be learning. You come in, you probably know this already when you left or they sent it to you, but like the schedule for the days, when are we meeting? When are we practicing? We know when they're practicing, but the meetings, the workout schedule, the film watching, all that good stuff. And then what was our conditioning test? The Bears are probably doing their conditioning test. We're not going to be able to see that. It's just something that's fun, but it's also, it makes you a little bit anxious. And there's nothing like getting out there for the first day of practice after learning these plays and just letting it cut loose, being able to hit someone. And we're going to have to wait the acclimation period to see some people hit and to really see what these tackles, offensive line, defensive line can do. But it's going to be an exciting training camp, a lot of position battles. And I think we're going to be more surprised with some of these things, some of these players than we think.
An exciting training camp indeed. Optimism at an all-time high. The Bears are 0-0. Ben Johnson is here to fix Caleb Williams. We do this to ourselves every year, guys. Let's hope this time it doesn't crash and burn.
14 years since our last playoff win. I think this is it's gonna happen this year, or we're gonna get close. No, I mean that's what everybody's hoping for.
Since then, Clay, is this the best chance this team has?
I think so. I think, you got that little piece of hope after 2018 that you really thought this could be a chance for the Bears to turn a corner. But when you're last place in the division 7 of the last 11 years, I think this is a year that has a lot of hope, and a lot of it has to do with Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, number 1 overall pick. If there was a overall pick for coach, even number 1 overall pick coach, number 1 overall pick quarterback. The vibes are really high. Alex is a vibes guy out there at Hallis Hall. So I think it'll be exciting. It'll be a fun training camp.
It's great stuff, guys. We are going to have you covered all season long, everyone, all training camp, all season long, right here on the Charter Podcast, Chicago Sports Network. We are going to have a lot of fun. And we're excited. So thanks for tagging along with us. We hope we do a good job of making you feel like you're there if you can't be there. And we'll talk about it all. So thanks for listening to the Charter Podcast, brought to you by St. Xavier University. For Clay Harbor, 𝗪𝗓 𝗏𝗂, I'm Ruthie 𝗶𝗶 𝗟𝗏. We'll see you later this week.